The Galactic Defense Academy stood as a monument to cooperation among the stars, or at least that's what the brochure claimed. In reality, it was more like an intergalactic high school, where the popular kids had extra limbs and the ability to breathe methane. The Academy's main campus orbited the gas giant Vorlox, its gleaming titanium alloy structures reflecting the amber light of the nearby star like a cosmic disco ball. If architectural designs could speak, this one would be saying, "Look how advanced we are," with just a hint of overcompensation. Human Integration Class 5A was in session, packed with the usual assortment of species that made up the Academy's diverse student body. Diverse, that is, if you counted 17 varieties of multi-limbed beings with exoskeletons as diverse. The lone human cadet sat in the third row, Lieutenant Junior Grade Elaine Mercer, whose expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps being slowly digested by a Jargorian mud beast, or attending a 4-hour lecture on quintillion mating rituals. Instructor Vorkat Zitan, a 7-foot-tall draconian with scales that changed color with his mood, currently a smug shade of emerald, paced before the class with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his 300-year lifespan. "Today," Vorkath announced, his voice carrying that particular resonance that only beings with 3 separate vocal cords can achieve, "we discuss combat protocols when facing a Type 3 civilization aggressor." He paused dramatically, as if expecting gasps. None came. The class had learned that Vorkath's dramatic pauses happened approximately 12 times per lecture. One enterprising Centaurian had even made a drinking game out of it, though since Centaurians absorbed alcohol through their eye membranes, the professors hadn't caught on yet. "Lieutenant Mercer," Vorkath said, his scales shifting to a condescending amber. "Perhaps you could enlighten us on the proper response when confronted by a Krolazan battlecruiser." Mercer straightened in her seat. At 5'7", she was dwarfed by most of her classmates, but something in her posture suggested she didn't particularly care. "Krolazan battlecruisers have a vulnerability in their ventral sensor array," she answered, her voice level. "Standard protocol is to approach from below the galactic plane and target—" "Wrong," Vorkath interrupted, his scales flashing a satisfied crimson. The draconian seemed to derive particular pleasure from correcting the human. That approach was rendered obsolete by the Krolozon shield reconfiguration of the Galactic Standard Year 23.456. "Honestly, Lieutenant, do humans ever read updates, or do you simply rely on your primitive instincts?" A ripple of amusement passed through the class, the kind of laughter that costs nothing to those making it, but takes something from its target. Mercer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "With respect, Instructor," she said, the words "with respect" clearly meaning anything but. The Krolozan shield reconfiguration applies only to their Dreadnought-class vessels. Battlecruisers still maintain the original configuration due to power constraints. She paused, then added, "Page 1042 of the Fleet Technical Manual. Appendix C, if you need to refresh your memory." The classroom temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. Vorkath's scales shifted to a dangerous purple. A color students knew meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Perhaps," Vorkath said, slithering toward Mercer's desk with deliberate slowness, "humans would be better served by learning their place before attempting to correct their superiors." In the back row, a Zenovian with compound eyes made a soft whistling sound, the equivalent of saying, "Ooh, snap," in 17 simultaneous frequencies. The Academy had stood for 10,000 years, a testament to the unified will of 47 spacefaring civilizations. Humans had been invited to join a mere 80 years ago, after they'd stumbled upon faster-than-light travel and promptly crashed their prototype vessel into a Meldorian wedding convoy. It wasn't the most auspicious first contact, but it could have been worse. At least the Meldorians considered unexpected explosions to be good luck in marriage. Most species had millennia of space travel under their belts before joining the Academy. Humans had barely figured out how to stop killing each other over patches of dirt when they were reluctantly admitted. It was like letting a toddler join a doctoral program, and everyone knew it, especially the toddler. The Academy's senior council had debated for 3 full cycles whether to even allow humans to apply. The debate had grown so heated that 2 council members, both from gaseous species, had partially evaporated in frustration. In the end, it was decided that humans could attend if only to civilize them before they did something truly catastrophic like accidentally trigger a supernova while trying to improve their coffee makers. And so, the Academy reluctantly opened its doors and humans reluctantly walked through them, both sides eyeing each other with the wariness of species who understood they were stuck with each other, but weren't particularly happy about it. Mercer was part of the 4th human class to attend. The first class had been a disaster. 3 diplomatic incidents, 1 accidental poisoning, turns out humans can't metabolize selenium-based desserts, and a regrettable incident involving an Arcturian ambassador's ceremonial head crest and a human cadet's chewing gum. The second class had fared better, primarily by speaking as little as possible. The third had actually graduated a few cadets who were now serving on deep space vessels, probably being assigned to clean the quantum waste extract. The current class was determined to prove that humans belonged, a task made infinitely more difficult by instructors like Vorkath. Vorkath's ancestors had evolved on a planet with triple Earth's gravity, and atmosphere so thick you could practically swim through it. This resulted in a species with incredible physical strength and the ability to move with surprising speed, despite their bulky appearance. It also resulted in an insufferable superiority complex that 10 millennia of galactic civilization had done nothing to diminish. The training program at the Academy was notoriously demanding. Cadets were expected to master everything from 11-dimensional calculus to proper etiquette when dining with gaseous life forms. The physical training was equally brutal. Endurance runs in variable gravity, combat exercises against species with natural advantages, and survival training on hostile planets where the atmosphere could strip the paint off a starship. Humans, with their fragile bodies and laughably short lifespans, were expected to fail. Many did. But those who remained developed a certain stubborn resilience that made even some of the instructors grudgingly admit, in private, after several intoxicating beverages, that humans might have potential. Not Vorkath, though. To him, humans remained an evolutionary mistake that the galaxy would eventually correct. The combat training hall echoed with the sounds of various species practicing their techniques. The cavernous space featured gravity plates that could be adjusted to match any world's conditions, atmosphere bubbles for species with exotic breathing requirements, and training drones programmed with the fighting styles of 1,000 different cultures. Mercer stood in the center of her assigned zone, facing a holographic opponent that shifted between different species, forcing her to adapt her technique with each transformation. She moved with precision, her smaller size allowing her a speed advantage that partially offset her strength disadvantage. Vorkath observed from the edge of the training floor, his scales a contemplative blue. He watched as Mercer dispatched a simulation of a Tarkanian warrior, then a Voltrak sentinel, then a Quartoth berserker. Each time, she adjusted her approach, using her opponent's strengths against them. When the simulation ended, Mercer stood in the center of the zone, breathing heavily but composed. The class data board showed her score. 94.7%, the highest of the day so far. Vorkath's scales shifted to that dangerous purple again. "Lieutenant Mercer," he called, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the training hall. "You seem to believe yourself proficient. Perhaps a more practical demonstration is in order." The other cadets stopped what they were doing. A practical demonstration meant facing an instructor directly, something that happened rarely and usually ended badly for the cadet. "I'm ready, Instructor," Mercer said, her voice betraying no emotion. Vorkath entered the training zone, his 7-foot frame casting a shadow over the human. "Combat protocols against a physically superior opponent," he announced to the class. "Observe carefully." He began circling Mercer slowly. "In such situations, the inferior combatant, that would be you, Lieutenant, must recognize their limitations. Surrender is often the wisest course." "Surrender isn't in my vocabulary, sir," Mercer replied, maintaining her position while rotating to keep facing him. "No? Perhaps that explains why humans remain so charmingly primitive," Vorkath said, his scales rippling with amusement. "Always fighting battles you cannot win. We've won a few," Mercer countered. "Against each other, certainly. Quite impressive to be the dominant species on a single, unremarkable planet." Several cadets chuckled. A Havenite with translucent skin couldn't hide the dopamine rush visible in its neural pathways. Drama was the same in any species, apparently. "Begin," Vorkath said suddenly, lunging forward with a speed that belied his size. Mercer sidestepped, barely avoiding a grasping claw that would have ended the demonstration in seconds. She countered with a quick strike to what would have been a vulnerable point on a human opponent, but merely bounced off Vorkath's dense musculature. "Predictable," Vorkath commented, sweeping his tail in a low arc that forced Mercer to jump. "Humans always target the same anatomical weaknesses, regardless of species. It's as if you believe the universe designed everything according to your template." He struck again, this time catching Mercer's arm. With minimal effort, he flipped her onto her back. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. "Notice the difference in strength," Vorkath lectured as Mercer scrambled to her feet. "No amount of technique can fully compensate for evolutionary inadequacy." The class watched, a mixture of fascination and discomfort evident on their various facial structures. It was one thing to believe in species superiority. It was another to watch it demonstrated so thoroughly. "Perhaps this is why humans resort to their technology so quickly," Vorkath continued, easily blocking Mercer's next attack. "When your natural gifts are so limited, artificial advantages become necessary." Mercer didn't respond. She was conserving her energy, analyzing her opponent. Vorkath was strong, fast, and experienced, but he was also arrogant. And arrogance created openings. "I understand your academy entrance scores were impressive," Vorkath said, striking again and again, forcing Mercer to remain defensive. "For a human, did you know there was considerable debate about whether the tests should be adjusted to accommodate your species' limitations? Some felt it would be kinder." Mercer feinted left, then dropped to sweep Vorkath's legs. The instructor easily jumped over the attempt. "Your determination is admirable, if futile," Vorkath said. "But determination alone will not save you when facing a superior opponent. Eventually, physics asserts itself." As if to demonstrate, he caught Mercer with a backhand strike that sent her stumbling. Before she could recover, he was on her, pinning her with one clawed hand. "Yield, Lieutenant," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Know your place." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "My place is right here, sir." Something in her tone must have registered with Vorkath, because his scales flickered momentarily to a cautious yellow. But then the purple returned, deeper than before. "Your defiance is noted," he said, "but ultimately meaningless." And then he did something unprecedented. He slapped her. Not a combat strike, but a slap. The kind reserved for inferiors. For pets. For beings considered beneath respect. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent training hall. For one eternal second, nobody moved. Mercer's head was turned to the side from the impact, a red mark already forming on her cheek. Vorkath stood over her, scales now a triumphant gold, clearly believing he had made his point. That's when it happened. The human moved with a speed that even the Academy's sensors had difficulty tracking. One moment she was pinned beneath the instructor, the next she had somehow slipped free and was in motion. Mercer didn't target Vorkath's scales or his throat or any of the standard vulnerable points taught in Academy combat classes. Instead, she struck at the one weakness Draconians rarely defended because few knew about it. The neural cluster at the base of their jaw, where their 3 vocal cords connected. Her first 2 fingers jabbed with surgical precision into that spot, instantly paralyzing Vorkath's vocalization system. As he reacted to this unexpected attack, she was already moving again, using his own momentum to destabilize his center of gravity. For a being evolved in a high-gravity environment, balance was everything. Lose it, and all that strength became a liability. Vorkath found himself airborne, his 7-foot frame flipping end over end before crashing to the training mat with enough force to activate the hall's seismic dampeners. Before he could recover, Mercer was on him, her knee pressed against his throat, her elbow jammed against his primary cardiac membrane. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds. The class erupted into chaos. Several cadets began recording with their neural interfaces. This would be shared across every communication channel in the Academy within minutes. A quantum observer from Rigel 7 actually split into 3 separate probability states from sheer shock. Vorkath's scales had gone white, a color no cadet had ever seen before. His eyes, all 4 of them, were wide with disbelief. "Sir," Mercer said, her voice perfectly calm despite the adrenaline surely coursing through her system. "I believe the demonstration is complete. Shall I yield now?" The silence that followed was broken only by the soft whirring of the training hall's atmospheric regulators, struggling to process the increased respiration of 32 stunned cadets. Vorkath couldn't speak. The pressure point Mercer had struck would leave him vocally paralyzed for at least 10 minutes. But the look in his eyes carried a message clearer than any words. This wasn't over. Mercer released her hold and stood, offering a hand to help the instructor up. A human gesture of reconciliation that, in this context, felt almost like a second insult. Vorkath ignored it, rising to his feet with as much dignity as he could muster, which wasn't much considering his scales were still cycling through colors like a malfunctioning light display. Senior Instructor Calyx entered the training hall at that moment, his 16 sensory tentacles already quivering with alarm. As the Academy's discipline officer, he had probably been alerted by the unusual readings from the training sensors. "Explain," Calyx demanded, his voice simultaneously emerging from all points in the room thanks to his species' sound projection abilities. No one spoke. The cadets looked at each other, then at Mercer, then at Vorkath, whose mouth was opening and closing without producing sound. "I'm waiting," Calyx said, his tentacles darkening, a sign of growing irritation. Finally, a Meridian cadet with 4 arms and a notorious inability to keep quiet spoke up. "Instructor Vorkath was demonstrating combat techniques against physically superior opponents, sir. Lieutenant Mercer was his partner, and..." Calyx prompted, clearly sensing there was more to the story. "And the demonstration was educational," the Meridian finished lamely. Calyx's tentacles twisted in a pattern that indicated deep skepticism. He turned to Mercer. "Lieutenant?" Mercer stood at attention. "Sir, Instructor Vorkath was demonstrating the advantages of superior strength and speed in combat situations. I was attempting to show that technique and knowledge of anatomical vulnerabilities can sometimes compensate for physical disadvantages." "I see," Calyx said, though his tone suggested he didn't see at all. "And why is Instructor Vorkath unable to speak?" "Temporary vocal paralysis, sir. A side effect of the demonstration." Calyx's primary eye swiveled to Vorkath, who was now frantically gesturing with his claws, his scales a chaotic swirl of colors. "Interesting," Calyx said. "I was unaware that combat demonstrations now included advanced nerve strikes not covered in the standard curriculum." A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Everyone knew that what Mercer had done went far beyond Academy-approved techniques. The question was whether anyone would actually say it. Vorkath pointed accusingly at Mercer, then made a slapping motion, followed by a series of gestures that presumably were meant to explain his version of events. "Instructor Vorkath appears to be saying that he struck you?" Calyx said to Mercer, his tentacles contorting in confusion. "It, sir," Mercer confirmed calmly. Another murmur, louder this time. Physical discipline was strictly forbidden at the Academy, a rule established after an unfortunate incident involving a Chthonian instructor and a gaseous cadet who had been temporarily dispersed across 3 decks. "Is this true?" Calyx demanded of the class. One by one, the cadets confirmed it. Even those who generally sided with Vorkath couldn't deny what they had seen. Calyx's tentacles darkened further. "Lieutenant Mercer, Instructor Vorkath, report to the Commandant's office immediately. The rest of you, training is suspended for the remainder of the cycle. Return to your quarters and await further instructions." As the cadets filed out, many cast glances back at Mercer. Some curious, some impressed, some clearly reconsidering their previous assessments of human capabilities. Vorkath, his scales now settled into a smoldering orange, stormed out of the training hall, his tail lashing behind him. Mercer followed at a respectful distance, her expression betraying nothing of her thoughts. But inside, where no one could see, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The Commandant's office was located at the top of the Academy's central spire, providing a panoramic view of the gas giant Vorlax and its 16 moons. The furnishings were sparse but elegant, artifacts from 100 worlds displayed in self-sustaining stasis fields, living sculptures that rearranged themselves according to the emotional atmosphere of the room, and a desk made from the fossilized neural tissue of an extinct species known for their wisdom. Behind this desk sat Commandant Thrix Vorla Khan, a being so ancient that rumors claimed she had personally signed the original Academy Charter 10 millennia ago. Her species aged at a rate that made Draconians seem mayfly-ish by comparison, and she had been the commandant for over 3,000 years. She had seen civilizations rise and fall, species go extinct and others achieve sentience, and more Academy scandals than anyone could count. Currently, she was watching the holo recording of the incident in the training hall. Her expression, if one could call it that, given her non-humanoid features, suggesting she had seen everything before and was not particularly impressed by this latest iteration. Mercer and Vorkath stood at attention before her desk. Vorkath had regained his voice, though it was still raspy from the nerve strike. "Instructor Vorkath," the Commandant said finally, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Would you care to explain why you thought it appropriate to slap a cadet?" Vorkath's scales shifted to a defensive blue. "Commandant, I was demonstrating proper techniques for subduing an opponent. Physical contact is necessary in such demonstrations." "Interesting," the Commandant replied. "I've reviewed the recording 17 times, and what I observed was not a training strike, but a deliberate slap. The distinction is clear, even to someone as ancient as myself." Vorkath's scales betrayed his discomfort, flashing briefly to an embarrassed purple before he regained control. "Perhaps the recording lacks context, Commandant." "Perhaps," the Commandant agreed. "Let's provide some, shall we? Over the past academic cycle, you have failed Lieutenant Mercer on 3 separate assessments, despite her objectively passing scores. You have assigned her punishment duties on 6 occasions for infractions that, when committed by non-human cadets, resulted in verbal warnings at most. And you have publicly questioned her competence on no fewer than 12 occasions, often using her species as the basis for your criticism. She manipulated a control on her desk, and a holographic display of Vorkath's teaching record appeared in the air between them. Sections highlighted themselves as the Commandant spoke, providing visual evidence of her claims. "This pattern suggests a prejudice that is, at minimum, unprofessional, and at worst a violation of the Academy's founding principles," the Commandant continued. "Would you care to address these concerns?" Vorkath's scales had settled into a dull grey, resignation mixed with anger. "Commandant, I maintain the highest standards for all cadets. If humans find those standards challenging, perhaps the issue lies not with the standards, but with their capabilities." "I see," the Commandant said. "And do these highest standards include physical discipline not sanctioned by Academy protocols?" Vorkath didn't answer immediately. The Commandant waited, her multiple sensory organs trained on him with uncomfortable intensity. "It was a momentary lapse in judgment," Vorkath finally admitted. But the Lieutenant's response was grossly disproportionate and employed techniques not taught in the curriculum. "Yes, about that." The Commandant turned to Mercer. "Lieutenant, where did you learn that particular nerve strike? It's not part of the standard human combat training." Mercer remained at attention. "From the Galactic Library Archives, Commandant. Specifically, Comprehensive Xenobiological Vulnerabilities. Volume 237, Draconian, Anatomical Weaknesses." It was in the public section. The Commandant made a sound that might have been a laugh if filtered through a different vocal apparatus. "Resourceful. And you memorized this information because knowledge is a tactical advantage, Commandant," Mercer replied. "Especially when one's physical attributes might be considered limiting." "Indeed," the Commandant said. "Knowledge has been the equalizer of species since the dawn of civilization." She turned back to Vorkath. "Your lapse in judgment, as you call it, has created a situation that now requires my attention. Physical discipline is forbidden at this academy. This is not negotiable." Vorkath's scales darkened. "Commandant, with respect, the human struck me as well." "Atza, you struck her," the Commandant interrupted. "The chronology is quite clear in the recording. Moreover, she was defending herself using knowledge she had acquired through legitimate means. You, on the other hand, were abusing your authority." The Commandant manipulated another control, and the disciplinary records of both Vorkath and Mercer appeared. "This is not your first infraction related to human cadets, Instructor. It is, however, the most serious." She sat back, or performed the equivalent motion for her physiology, and observed them both for a long moment. "Lieutenant Mercer, You are dismissed. Report to medical for assessment of any injuries sustained during the demonstration. You will be notified of any further actions regarding this incident." Mercer saluted crisply. "Yes, Commandant. Thank you, Commandant." As she turned to leave, the Commandant added, "And Lieutenant, while I cannot officially condone your response to Instructor Vorkath's actions, I will note that your technique was precise." Was that approval in the Commandant's voice? Hard to tell with a being whose emotional expressions evolved before most species developed writing. "Instructor Vorkath, remain," the Commandant ordered as Mercer exited. "We have much more to discuss." The door slid shut behind her, leaving Vorkath alone with a being who had seen the rise and fall of empires and had very little patience left for petty prejudices. The Academy buzzed with rumors for days afterward. Some said Vorkath had been demoted, others that he had been reassigned to the remote research outpost on Deneb 4, a frozen wasteland inhabited primarily by silico-based life forms with a cultural taboo against raising one's voice, a particularly harsh punishment for a vocally expressive draconian. Still others claimed he had been forced to enroll in a sensitivity training program taught by telepathic empaths who could literally make him feel the emotional impact of his actions on others. The truth, when it finally emerged, was both simpler and more profound. Vorkath remained an instructor, but his curriculum now included a mandatory section on integrated combat techniques across species, co-taught with none other than Lieutenant Mercer. The first class was standing room only, with cadets from every year crowding in to witness the unlikely partnership. Vorkath's scales were a subdued green as he introduced the course, his voice carefully neutral as he explained the importance of understanding diverse anatomical structures and their implications for combat. When Mercer stepped forward to demonstrate the first technique, a respectful silence fell over the room. She moved with the same precise efficiency she had shown in the training hall, but now her movements were instructional rather than defensive. "The key," she explained to the class, "is not to view physiological differences as advantages or disadvantages, but as variables to be accounted for in your tactical approach." She looked at Vorkath, who nodded almost imperceptibly before adding, "A principle that applies beyond combat, as many of you will discover in your careers." The class exchanged glances. Was that growth from Instructor Vorkath? The Academy rumor mill would be working overtime on this development. After the class, as cadets filed out discussing the techniques they had learned, a Havenite approached Mercer. Its translucent skin revealed neural patterns indicating curiosity mixed with admiration. "Lieutenant," it said, its voice a melodic sequence of tones, "is it true that humans have a saying about the most dangerous weapon being knowledge?" Mercer smiled. "We have many sayings about knowledge, Cadet. My personal favorite is, never bring a closed mind to an open universe." The Havenite's neural pathways lit up in what appeared to be understanding. "I believe I will remember that, Lieutenant. Thank you for the lesson." Both of them. As the Havenite departed, Mercer found herself alone with Vorkath for the first time since the incident. An awkward silence stretched between them. Finally, Vorkath spoke, his scales shifting through several colors before settling on a shade Mercer had never seen before, a deep teal that seemed to indicate reluctant respect. "Your technique was flawless," he said. "I have instructed for 7 decades and never experienced a counter so elegant. Coming from a draconian, this was practically a sonnet of praise." "Thank you, Instructor," Mercer replied, keeping her tone professional. "I had an excellent opponent." Vorkath made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "An excellent opponent who underestimated you. A mistake I assure you I will not repeat, nor will anyone else who was present," Mercer observed. "No," Vorkath agreed. "I suspect the Academy's perception of human capabilities has been recalibrated." He hesitated, then extended a clawed hand, adopting the human gesture of reconciliation that Mercer had offered in the training hall. "I look forward to our next class, Lieutenant." Mercer took the offered hand, careful of the sharp claws. "As do I, Instructor." As they walked from the classroom, neither spoke further. But something had changed. Not just between them, but potentially for all humans at the Academy. The story would spread, growing with each retelling until it became legend. The day a human cadet took down a draconian instructor before the class could blink. The universe, it seemed, was full of surprises. And humans might just be the biggest surprise of all. In the administrative wing of the academy, Commandant Thritz Vorla Khan watched the interaction on her monitor, her ancient eyes seeing patterns that stretched beyond individual moments to the greater tapestry of galactic civilization. She had witnessed countless species rise from primitive beginnings to take their place among the stars. Some faded into obscurity, others found their niche and thrived, and a rare few reshaped the very societies they joined. As she observed the human and the draconian walking side by side, not quite friends, but no longer quite enemies, she allowed herself a moment of speculation about humanity's ultimate role in the cosmic drama. Perhaps, she thought, the greatest strength was not in never being knocked down, but in how quickly one got back up, and how much one learned in the process. If that were the case, humans might just turn out to be among the strongest species of all. With a gesture, she closed the monitor and turned her attention to the next crisis demanding her attention. The Academy had stood for 10,000 years, and would stand for 10,000 more, continuing to evolve as it incorporated each new species and their unique perspectives. And if that evolution occasionally required a slap and a surprise encounter, well, that was simply the universe's way of keeping things interesting.